Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Tifo Football podcast. We'll be back next week with the podcast as normal, but this week we're joined by senior writers for The Athletic, Ollie Kay and Danny Taylor, to talk about the experience of covering Sir Alex Ferguson. This is obviously in celebration of his 80th birthday and part of our new State of the Club episode. If you haven't seen it, it was released yesterday, and head on over to the Illustrated channel, and I hope you enjoy it. And on with the podcast. So I think from an outsider's perspective, the experience of covering Sir Alex Ferguson looked absolutely terrifying. And for a journalist, you're presumably aware of never asking the wrong question or kind of treading on things which he didn't want mentioned. What was the angriest you ever saw him?
The angriest? Where do I even start with Fergie's temper tantrums? He could be terrifying. You kind of every Friday we'd turn up, and it was the kind of most exciting part of the week. But the other journalists would be there, and it'd all be like, what kind of moods you're going to be in, and it's kind of you always have to plan your questions accordingly. The sort of things you don't have to do with most managers, but he could take you by surprise. So basically, the times where you thought he'd be like raging because they'd had a bad result and a load of bad press, he might be in a decent mood, and then other times where you turn up and it's United are winning games, and he'd just be incredible. So I really, the hardest thing is trying to kind of put it in words when he did lose it, because for starters he was very clever. So he'd never did it when there was a television camera in the room. So me and Ollie really should have, because we used to always put tapes down on the table, and I kill myself that we never kept those tapes.
I've still got one somewhere. I don't know where it is, but in amongst
they would be gold dust. Basically,
they would be. I'm going to,
because I don't think people realise, because it's just hard to say. Oh yeah, he's had a bad temper, but he could turn it on and off and he'd go from like absolutely. I mean, he'd be leaning over the table at you. This guy in his 70s, and when I talk about the tapes, there was one time where he actually got so mad he sort of like smashed all the tapes off it. But Di Law, who was a press officer, her tape smashed. Like the batteries were like sort of skittling across the floor and stuff. And so they're all but then he could just within 30 seconds be telling a joke, and his colour of his face would just change, and he'd just be kind of. But it's really hard to. We spent like a long time sort of analysing, didn't we? And I think a lot of the time he would do it to keep you in place, to kind of just remind you that he could do it. But there was never, sometimes I think he just did it just to let off a bit of steam, just to make himself feel better, basically. But he was very clever. The door would be closed, and in later years, when he started doing all the press conferences in one, so the TV cameras there, you could see sometimes if something annoyed him, but you wouldn't see the temper, because he used to do them in separate press conferences for broadcasting and for the written journalists, like the newspapers. And it was in the newspapers one where he could go off the record. He didn't go off the record too often, but he could savage people and kind of get away with it. And it kind of changed, I think, when there was one. What you've got a better memory than me, but there was one where we just got sick of it, and basically we I think it was about Varane, where we reported it verbatim what he said.
It was the end of the 2001-2 season, and United had just got knocked out of the Champions League by Leverkusen, and they were short of Arsenal in the title race, and it was coming up to this vital game against Arsenal at Old Trafford, which Arsenal won famously. And on the eve of that game, Ferguson he sort of launched into one in front of us because we'd been sort of questioning the signing of Varane. Varane was meant to be the sort of icing on the cake signing at the start of that season, and it had sort of the chemistry of the team had been affected, I think, and it hadn't really worked in a way that Ferguson had envisaged, and he was getting a bit of criticism for that, which he wasn't too happy about, and he just launched into one. And what sticks in the mind is what was it? Use a fucking idiots. He's a fucking great player. Use a fucking idiots, and he chucked us out. Ejected us from the room, and normally
he actually just said, right, press conference over, all of you.
Away, right.
But
that was his goodbye.
But I remember just a group of us just sort of looking at our shorthand notes or listening back to the tape and thinking, what do we do with this? It's called it short. And we did decide, we'll just we'll just report it as it is. You know, we'll report that he lost the plot with us and screamed and, you know, defense of Veron. And I think that was us probably saying we're not standing for that. But also, I think in response to that, I think he decided he wasn't going to stand for us.
Yeah.
Doing that
Can you
anyway,
remember Bill Thornton of the Daily Star, who was a bit more of the generation where so me and Ollie were younger. Bill had been there on the scene a bit longer, and Bill didn't agree with us writing this, and Bill didn't write it. And I always remember that when the story came out, it's back pages everywhere, and his paper didn't have it. And he worked for the Daily Star, and if you work for the Daily Star, he missed this. You know, I think he was in an awkward spot basically. And this is the other side of Fergie. Fergie got in touch with the Daily Star and actually rang through to the editor to basically say, leave Bill alone, and like he's in. And then
did he
mysteriously, I think Bill Thornton had the exclusive about Rio Ferdinand signing about a few weeks later, and it's like that was like the story of the transfer story of the year. So we're talking about Fergie's temper. I look back on those times and basically think how we were lucky. You know, we were literally sitting from me to you away from like managerial greatness. It didn't always feel that way at the time. And he's the biggest hypocrite. He's we laugh about his temper, but sometimes it was horrendous. Like he would treat people horrendously. Like, but you know, he put the whole thing together. Like and I feel like now I guess press conferences now, and I feel like because I had so many years of Fergie, I find every press conference now dull as dishwater. And well, not everyone, but you know what I mean. The whole process, the whole culture of press conferences is so bland and grey, and that's because there's no, you know, it's so dreary, isn't it now? And sometimes it's good to have a bit of a ruck and get things out in the open, and so you get people talking properly. And you know, Fergie, when he actually did talk properly, the football world listened, and it sounds a bit corny, but it was quite an education to be there and to, you know, this guy got more knowledge than me and Ollie and all the rest of us put together. And so I look back and think that was a privilege to be there. But if you said to me, do you like him? I'd be like, well, I like lots of him, and he's like, you know, he's funny, charming. It could be incredibly long, but then he's got all these like horrendous traits as well, you know. Because I remember once he did it. When he talked about his worst ones, one of his worst ones, he just absolutely mullered everybody, and at the end of it, there was like a 13-year-old girl in work experience at the back of the room, like kind of like cowering in the back, and he went and he was like, well, I won't swear too much, but I mean, he was like, sorry about love, but you know, these bleeps.
Look what they made me do.
It was these bleeps need telling.
Yeah.
That was it. Right. To some girl, it was, and you know, there's multiple stories like that, basically.
I know I was going to ask you, because now that today's press conferences, in my short experience, there's no one who's frightening or intimidating. You know what to expect because these guys appear on television so much. The illusion is of knowing them and knowing what their character traits are. But for someone like me, of some of my generation, I couldn't imagine how intimidating it might be to do a first press conference with someone like that, or ask a first question. Do you remember your first, and sort of the kind of how long it took you to kind of feel part of that little press back in that part of the country, or part of his little stable of journalists that he spoke to regularly?
It was an interesting thing as a journalist, because I mean, Danny and I both moved to Manchester in the late 90s, and United were obviously, you know, at that point he had just won the European Cup. Well, certainly when I went there, United had just won the European Cup. They were dominant. He was finally in a position, you know, in complete contrast to a decade earlier, where he was, you know, people were in awe of him, and he was in complete control of the media, basically. Well, couldn't control what people wrote, but could control who came and went to the press conferences, etc. The Mirror and the Mail were banned long term when I moved to Manchester, and there was a very quick turnover, really, of a lot of the journalists changed. It went from there being a lot of older journalists to a lot of younger ones, like, you know, you mentioned. No, it was off air. so Yes, so the demographic of the journalists changed a lot, the dress code, the dress sense. I would imagine
he didn't trust any journalist. He saw us as kids. If you were under the age of 50 or so, I can remember Ian Ladyman told me a story about Ian. The Mail were banned, and Ian went to see him, and I think Ian mentioned that, basically said something about his age or something. I think Fergie sort of stopped because Fergie sort of saw us all as 18-year-olds. And Ian at that time would have been in his early 40s or something, but he genuinely, but his eyes would light up if he saw one of the older, like that, because he kind of knew that he'd had longer with them, and he saw and yeah, probably I've seen him tell people off for being unshaven, and I can remember one time, and were you there when Danny Fulbrook turned up for the first time? Yeah. So Danny Fulbrook, who was mid-30s, two kids, married, came from London because someone was off, or so he came up deputising for the Daily Star. And it was, if you went into Fergie's press conference and for the first time, there would be a big thing about it, because all the other journalists
would he point you out? Would he be kind of like,
who are you? Who are you?
Who are you? Where are you from?
Eyes narrowing.
Yeah. Like, he'd be like straight away aggressive, like, who are you? And so the other journalists would be loving it, because if you weren't the one getting the bollocking, what's better than seeing? I just love it. I've got a story about Ollie in a minute, but
please don't.
But it was hilarious. It was like brilliant. We'd come out. I mean, you feel like you made to feel like children, because he treats you like children. So you come out like giggling, basically, like when you're getting told off at school. But anyway, Danny Fulbert turns up, and we're all telling him, just sit down at the back and don't say anything. Where it's actually better to go and introduce yourself. And Danny is he's died. But he was quite a confident character, wasn't he? And basically you could tell he basically thought, it's not a big deal, I'll go. And so he kind of went straight to the front of this little room. It's like the size that is, sort of put his hand out. Fergie ignored his hand, and he went, I'm Danny Fulbrook from Days. Fergie looked at the rest of us, and basically, I can't do his Scottish accent, but he went,
please do.
No, he went, fucking hell. Do they get them straight from school these days? That was his form of hello to a guy in his 30s.
And
who's got his hand out.
In front of all of his peers.
Yeah, in front of all of us. So we're all despicable, two-faced human beings. We all sort of laugh with Fergie. Oh, Fergie. I mean, Fergie made a crap joke. We would all laugh like sycophants and completely threw Danny under the bus and stuff. But yeah. So the first time you met, the first time I met him, he did at least shake my hand, and he asked me who I was from, and he just sort of stared. It was at Peter Schmeichel was leaving, and to Peter Schmeichel, so I kind of surprised I didn't know, but I actually just went over and walked over to him and sort of asked him if I could speak to him, like one-on-one, which is kind of quite really rare.
For the first and last time.
It was the first. And like his mates in the journal were like all kind of like, Pete Fitness of the world were all like furious at Fergie. And he sort of did it. I think he then kind of realised, because he did like 3 questions, and then he just sort of like looked at me in a way that said, "This is done now." So that was a reasonable start, to be fair. But,
all downhill from there.
Yeah, but my story about Ollie, and to be fair to him, it's painting you a good light. This, because sometimes you had to sacrifice yourself. Sometimes you had to be the person to ask there's an obvious question, and and there's always like in a press conference, there's always like, oh, someone's going to have to ask this question, because. Like Wayne Rooney's been sent off. Who's going to chuck it in? Because the Smashing Tapes one was about Wayne Rooney. He had been sent off against Bolton. He went mad that day, didn't he? Anyway, so there were times where nobody is in the mood or wants to put themselves forward. And I always remember after one game, I think they'd been playing 4-5-1, and the crowd had been chanting 4-4-2. And that sounds a bit mad now, but they hated it that
when they tried to go for one in his
midfield. Yeah. And Fergie would always batter us for not asking tactical questions and all that. And he'd love it when the foreign press came, and he'd really make a song and dance about sort of welcoming them in and
a couple of words of Italian and Spanish.
Yeah. He loved all that, but and it was Ollie who sacrificed himself, knowing that. You have to put yourself in a position where you think, I'm going to probably get a bollocking here, and he'll hold this against me possibly ever, or at least for the foreseeable future. You're literally talking about getting bans from press conferences, which as a journalist is not fun to be.
Just for asking a question, because if you've been at a game and a player gets sent off, you is that him responding organically to you? Is it
well, maybe he wouldn't be banned for asking about a red card, but if you asked about a tricky subject in the
off the field incident,
or something like that,
maybe,
then so I can just remember you asked the question, and what would be a normal question to you? If I asked it was literally something, and Fergie. What did he say to you? I probably remember what he said, but he completely put Ollie down in front of 30 people. Again, we all laugh at it.
I'm laughing now. I don't think I was laughing at the time.
But obviously, it has to be asked. So some people, the reason I admire Ollie. I'm telling the story in a nice way. That Ollie thought nobody's going to do this, am I? And probably got to a point where he's thinking he's going to walk out. Nobody's going to even ask this question. I better do it. And sure enough, got the bollocking, got Fergie staring at him as he walked out.
But his line was, "I wouldn't want to blunt your imagination." I think I've used that subsequently.
Yeah. So he stared at you as he walked out of the press conference, just glared at you.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to blunt your imagination was his answer to this tactical question.
No, he was his ability to, as Danny said. It would make you laugh at times. It would make your blood boil at times. The one thing I think opposition fans always used to feel that he completely controlled us, and that these bans basically worked.
We didn't work with him.
The way the managers who got a good press out of being good with the press.
Yeah.
That's it's the ones who would get the press close, would fraternize with them, would make them feel special. They're the managers who.
Well, other patches, that would often happen in Merseyside, the North East.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a working relationship. Managers would tell them stuff off the record. We got a story, we'd just go with it because there was no, and so that probably ended up pushing things further apart, as well as our ages and the fact that we were a bit scruffy and
punctuality. He wasn't keen on my punctuality.
No, none of us are keen on your punctuality, to be fair. But anyway, but yeah, but it is. I find that funny that people, basically it's Fergie's little press pack. But it's just like we would take a chance and think, I hope he doesn't read this. And I mean, he read the Express, didn't he? And he didn't read it, but I think he obviously had a press officer who put things in front of him, and but yeah, I mean, he had one press conference where Tim Rich had driven down from Newcastle for this press conference, and he had this press conference like ridiculously early.
So 8 a.m. wasn't it? 8 a.m. So Tim had left at
8 a.m.
5 o'clock.
So he'd left, and I mean, it's kind of early. We lived in Manchester; it was early for us. We were like, getting to Carrington for you obviously get there early and stuff, but it was an early start anyway. I mean, and basically we were a bit like, what's this all about? And he basically walked in. I think this was the world record quickest one, wasn't it? Because and the whole thing was, I remember writing, you could boil an egg quicker, but you can actually take the top off an egg quicker. Because the whole thing was him walking in, shouting, I brought you fuckers down here to tell you to all fuck off.
What was it literally? Was it
literally he wanted to bring us in to tell us to fuck off.
Not in relation to anything specific. It was just to make a point.
Because basically, there
would have been a trigger point.
They probably had lost a couple of games, and there was I can't think it was anything specific, but there were people who driving all over the country to get to this press, and he called it specifically just to basically because he wanted to come in and enjoy telling us to F off and get out of here. And to be fair, again, I would have been in my car afterwards laughing my head off because I know that I've got to ring my boss and say, there's not much from Fergie this week.
That massive hole that we've got on
yeah. I might have to write an actual thought piece rather than relying on Fergie's quotes. But
every now and again, something would come up. So one of the topics we cover in the State of the Club episode is the Rock of Gibraltar saga. And that's one of those where it's fair game, it's territory for a journalist. What was the room like when things like that came up? Or did it come up?
Well, that was the one time I actually think that he And I think he was acting, because I think he's one of the best actors ever. And I can justify that because the happiest I've ever seen Fergie was the day that Roy Keane left. Roy Keane had been sacked at 10 o'clock that morning, and we went in at 12, and he said, he was joke after joke, like, arms behind his back, talking about Scotland winning the World Cup, taking the piss out of people. And then we asked about Roy Keane because he was meant to be getting a new contract, and he said, nothing going on. And then by the time, there used to be like a bacon butty van just on the road outside the training ground, and we go there if there's no work to do, or if there's not, if there was not a big story, we'd just get a bit of lunch and have a chinwag about what he'd. And we were sort of there, and we'd been there 5 minutes, and then someone's office rang and said,
everybody's office
rang, and said it's just dropped that Roy Keane's. I mean, Roy Keane was basically sacked, and we just literally sat with Fergie. And he's a brilliant actor. But I think he was acting because he basically was sat there looking like, he was basically telling us about how I've had people, probably, I doubt it was even true. I've had people I've had private investigators rummaging through my dustbins at home. I mean, I can't think you could get to Fergie's house and rummage through his dustbins. No. And, he was just like that. And, he was very kind of, not emotional, but he was very, he was showing his vulnerability for one of the very, very few times ever. And basically got a load of it was basically he wanted us to write about how despicable it was that he was being bullied by these people in Ireland, and look at this. And he talked about all this, they've been doing terrible things to me, and he got all the fans on his side. I think the game was at Tottenham. Next game was at Tottenham, and the whole United end just sang his name the whole way through. Cause
that one was when he'd said he was going to retire.
Oh yeah, I've got them wrong. You're right. Yeah, sorry.
And then he wanted to extend his contract, or he wanted to be kept on beyond his retirement.
Yeah. And there weren't many times when he used us, but I feel like he did that time.
You could definitely. I mean, there were definitely occasions where he did use us, and that the Rock of Gibraltar. Was he really sort of opened up about family stuff, personal stuff, saying how much he'd poured into the club over the previous what would have been 17 years, and he was he really sort of put it all out there in a way that he would never normally do, and that that, as Danny says, that was putting on an act really, and it was certainly using and manipulating the media. But I don't think there were many occasions where he did that. I think he would be very good at sort of putting a narrative out there and seizing, making sure that what he wanted on the back pages was on the back pages. You would sometimes get a thing where I remember there was one of the seasons, I think they were chasing Arsenal, I think it was 2002-03, and Arsenal were kind of looking not invincible but close to it. And I think Arsenal were playing at Blackburn. I'm pretty sure it was Arsenal playing at Blackburn. And he said about my frustration with Arsenal is that no team will get nearer them. No team will give them a kicking. Will ever make sure that they're in a game. Arsenal haven't been tested physically. And I don't know whether Blackburn are the team to do that. And you think, So cut to 3 o'clock on that afternoon, and it's after it's on every back page, and you've got Gary Flitcroft and people like that flying into tackles at Arsenal.
Was that the game where Eduardo got injured against Birmingham, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, but there would be occasions where he would make sure he dominated the pre-match narrative, the post-match narrative. If it was about distracting from a defeat, there would always be a ready-made line. It would never be off the cuff. He would always fly off the handle about a referee after a match, and he would know exactly what he was doing, and then he'd complain a couple of days later that he was in trouble with the FA or whatever, but he always knew what he was doing in those situations. He was always prepared to accept an FA, rap on the knuckles in exchange for shaping that post-match narrative.
One of the things that we also deal with is, I suppose, an issue of legacy, really. When the Glazer takeover happened, which is kind of response to Rock of Gibraltar, and the green and gold protest is happening in the background, there's conflict between, the not conflict, but I suppose a change in his relationship with some of the fans. Like, did that ever come up? Was that something that he was aware of, or showed that he was aware of?
Flight to Budapest, wasn't it, for a Champions League?
Oh yeah. He got accosted by some. He got accosted by some fans in the kind of. Yeah, they weren't happy, but I mean they weren't aggressive, but in the airport, and they were just basically saying to him what. But I always felt that was the point when Ferg, when he first came down from Scotland, he even had like a gold signet ring with Man United engraved in it because he wanted to show everyone that he was really, massively. But
because those things cost about $4.99.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But
massive investment.
I've never had one. But anyway, I kind of felt that was the point where he kind of stopped being one of the match. He kind of identified with the match-going fans. And I think at that point, he didn't. He's never, ever criticised the Glazers ever. And my personal theory is probably the people. I mean, he fell out with Martin Edwards, and Martin Edwards will always say, "Well, we only ever fell out about money." And I think the Glazers. I mean, even now he's getting paid multi-millions just to sit in the director's box, basically, and
not say what he thinks.
Yeah. So basically, that's my personal theory that he they've looked after him, and but I don't know. Maybe the old Fergie would have spoken up. I mean, basically, there's been massive issues. anyone, and I mean, it must be galling for him to see the way his legacy's been. I mean. Yeah, and as you say, it's kind of. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's one of the all-time greats, but he's the guy who started this kind of. The Rock of Gibraltar is what started the whole kind of process. If you join all the dots, he's the guy who cherry-picked David Moyes, and then when his autobiography kind of was updated, tried very hard to kind of like make it sound like he hadn't done because it hadn't worked. I'm sure if it had worked, he would have loved taking the glory for it. So there's all these kind of sides to him that he's very political, like he's a political beast basically, and I think I wouldn't say he changed, but basically I don't think he and the fans would identify with each other quite as much as they were.
No, I would say he became much more of a company man at that point around the time of the takeover. Before that, there had been many occasions where he'd called out the board publicly over not backing him in the transfer market or whatever.
He resigned at one point.
Yeah. And in the years after the Glazer takeover, obviously there was the odd time, like summer 2007, they went for it a bit. Obviously when they signed Van Persie in 2012, but generally speaking, he was working with arms tied behind his back at that point.
It was bits and pieces squad.
Certainly after 2009 and Ferdinand and Vidic and Evra and Giggs and Scholes and Van der Sar were all getting on a bit. How he won those next two league titles, and particularly the last one with what I think was a real patched up squad, was amazing. But I'd say by that point, he'd become much more of a sort of a company man rather than being this sort of, someone that the fans were. I mean, you very rarely. I mean, you didn't see if I went to different grounds, and you sometimes see the Arsenal the love that the Arsenal fans had for Wenger at that time, not towards the end, but at that time, the love that Liverpool fans had for Gerard Houllier and Rafa Benitez, who didn't achieve a fraction of what Ferguson achieved. And it never really felt like love for Ferguson in the later years. I know some of the fans would say, "Oh yeah,
I think people would be annoyed by that." But you're right. Like if you go down and look at all the, you're completely right. If you look at all the kind of the stalls that sell all the T-shirts and stuff, they'd be about Cantona and stuff rather than they used to sell like a T-shirt. Funnily enough, it was the "He's all f***ing idiots" was the T-shirt, but there was not like this. Liverpool fans, they kind of like worship the managers, don't they?
Yeah,
Newcastle fans,
it's a different culture.
It is a different culture, but it's slightly strange that basically, like the fanzines would really, really question Fergie, even when he's won like countless whatever they would hold him to account in a way that you wouldn't see elsewhere. And like you say, I know it doesn't tell you everything, but just I always found it a bit strange that there was no real kind of like Fergie brand to go with the. Do you
think he predated that? I mean, not predated is the wrong word, but because quite a lot of this generation's of Man United fans would have grown up whilst during his sort of decadent successful years, when like that's what they knew. He wasn't really, for older fans, he was a deliverer of success and a restorer of the club. But for younger people, probably anybody under the age of, I suppose, 45, they were born into this is what the club is, and it's always been him. So it becomes very difficult to distinguish between him, like the stadium, the architecture of the club, the kind of the physical stuff. Is that part of this?
I would guess that because he'd been there for years before he was successful.
Yeah.
So he wasn't like arriving as this messiah.
He wasn't a saviour.
If anybody was a messiah, it was probably Cantona coming in 92, and then you had
instant success.
And then there were all the Giggs, Beckham's goals, etc. I mean, the players that they had, they weren't short of heroes. Whereas sometimes it could feel like Newcastle with Kevin Keegan, he was the man who brought hope, etc. But it was also, when I say about there didn't seem to be that love for Ferguson amongst the fans, I do think if you go back to his final game or his final home game, that was an incredible occasion. It was emotional, and neither Danny nor I are United fans. It was an emotional occasion. There was a real outpouring for him.
Yeah. Do you know what I remember from that game? It was the way he and Rooney shook hands.
Oh yeah,
that was like my bite, because it was just like even then, Fergie had to settle a score.
Yeah.
And so he I mean, in Rooney's opinion, Rooney feels that he was shafted, basically. I feel like there's a bit of truth. They're both saying that Rooney was keen to leave. Fergie, who kept everything in-house, blurts this out, and the night before, like absolutely throws Rooney under a bus. It was like a leaving present for Moyes, basically. There was Thiago, and there was getting rid of Rooney, and funnily enough, neither happened. So even then, yes, it was like a big occasion and everything. I still just always thought, and the other thing was as well that David Meek's programme notes, because basically David Meek would write his programme notes for years and years and years, and
the Manchester Evening News.
Yeah. I mean, like basically a lovely guy. Being at the Manchester United. How long has he been? He got the job after Munich. After the Munich.
Really?
Yeah, he replaced the guy who had been killed. So he'd been there. He got the respect of everybody, and basically did Fergie's programme notes. And his last programme notes before he left was Fergie just spun in this just this nonsense about looking forward to the future, and I think he actually says something in it about, my appetite's as strong as ever for, you would have to be very careful with what Fergie told you, because he was, as most football managers are, a very, very accomplished liar, really.
Do you feel like the person? Sometimes I always think of the relationship between Douglas Hamilton and Brian Clough. And kind of the way that
please don't.
But it feels like, I mean, all that time spent with him and kind of you saw the rainbow of his personality. Did you ever feel as if there was a
I think he kept us a long arm's length away. As I say, I mean, I hope none of this sounds critical, because some of it is critical, but when he did open up, when he did, it was valuable time. You would cherish that time of feeling like you're learning. It's an education to sort of sit with someone that's done what he's done, but you wouldn't get many times away from football where he wouldn't come, and if he saw us in a hotel, he'd probably walk past us. He might say, "Hello, all right, boys." He might ignore us. He wouldn't come and sit and have a drink with us.
He'd quite often tell you shouldn't be there.
Yeah, if it's his team hotel, then
if you're at the team hotel, and
it
would be.
Yeah, he had his rules, and he expected you to know these rules and abide by them. And a lot of the stuff was, the rules, And it's like, well, do you want to write them down for me so I can have like a written, so, I think there's like, he bollocks John Motson. That's one of the few that's kind of, and even that's like, he bollocks John Motson once, that's on YouTube somewhere. And that's about, the rules. But it's a bit weird now because, so since Fergie, there's been Moyes who once tried to do a Fergie. I don't know if you were there.
No, I wasn't.
Moyes was obviously, it was going pear-shaped, and he was getting a lot of criticism and he didn't have any relationship. He'd obviously been at Everton for years. He had a good relationship with the Everton press, and I've seen him bollocking the Merseyside press. I had to go over there one time, and he had presence and authority, and they were all like, he was the main man. And he came to United, and I always remember Sam Allardyce saying, looks like he's aged about 10 years in 6 months. And he just shriveled. He couldn't. It was the size of the club. So every time everyone now goes, oh, maybe the United were. It wasn't. No, it wasn't he was going to have. It looked awful. He couldn't handle it basically. So anyway, Moyes tried to hairdryer everyone, and we'd have. Well, he didn't hairdryer. He tried to outstare everyone and do a Fergie and basically give everyone a bollocking. We've had like 10, 15, 20 years of Fergie. And it's like, it's hard to surpass what we've seen in that same room. And so it was just bemusing. And then Moyes got up and the door's sort of there to you. And he's kind of like walked the wrong way round and then had to go through everyone's chairs. and we're all like kind of, that wasn't very impressive. And he's like kind of like trying like, so excuse me, can I, and like, it was the least dramatic kind of storming out you've ever seen in your life. So Moyes wasn't. Then you got Van Gaal, and Van Gaal would dish out ball, but still there's no presence to him, and that's not his fault. It's just because of who he replaced. So basically, so you'd be watching Van Gaal being rude to people and being, as he is, bolshy and putting people down and talking to everyone as if
he's a difficult man. Yeah,
he's a difficult and again you'd be like, I don't feel in the least bit kind of intimidated or whatever you're trying to do, it's not working. And then even Mourinho, but Mourinho's press conferences were bland. United. There were a couple of exceptions, but they lasted 4 minutes. They were literally 4-minute press conferences. Mourinho changed by that point, but he didn't have the presence that he used to have at Chelsea. And then there was Solskjaer, which when I talk about bland. I mean, Solskjaer's press conferences were grey, weren't they? To be honest, he didn't miss much if you didn't attend them. Put it that way. And I just wonder whether that's fair. Even now, like nearly a decade on from Fergie going, it still kind of feels like very hard to follow. It's probably the same with Brian Clough and Forrest.
Yeah, but it's interesting, people would always say, because you mentioned Mourinho's press conferences, people have it in mind because they'll have seen one clip or 2 clips of Mourinho doing something that's quite, eye-catching or controversial or whatever.
It's because they're all done in front of TV cameras.
But people use the phrase box office for Mourinho's press conferences. Now, I don't know how many press conferences I've been to from Mourinho's, a few of them, maybe 3 out of 100 odd or something like that. But with Ferguson, they generally, not always, but they were very often box office one way or another, even if it was tapes flying and curses flying.
Well, I remember I was in the Luke Shaw Mourinho press conference when he made that comment about Luke's brain and my legs or whatever it was. And it felt very kind of very, very practiced and deliberate. And it is a sort of, right, we'll put this in a column somewhere. And that's, whereas the things that I've read, particularly in Danny's book about what Ferguson could be like and the dynamics of that felt like a sort of a different level of sincerity and or different level of peril perhaps and kind of consequence. Guys, this has been so interesting. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us. It's been a real privilege. And thank you for listening. And if you haven't already, please do go and watch the State of the Club episode, which is available now. Thank you very much.